Hey guys, it's Miss Rachel. I hope you guys are having a fantastic day. Before we get started, I'm going to share with you a science experiment. Now on Wednesday night, I also did a science experiment in that video, and that was pretty cool. So if you want to see it, go back and watch that video. It's at the end. But today, what I have with me is a jar, and in it I put some water, and then I put in some oil. Now, when you first put it in, you'll notice the oil and the water don't mix together. The oil all comes to the top of the jar and the water sits at the bottom. And even if I shake it, they don't mix up. Now, you might see some bubbles come up, and eventually those will pop. But the oil and the water have not mixed together. They stay separate. Now, the whole point of this is that this is how God wants us to be with sin. Sin, we know, with all the bad things that we do, and then all the good things that we do not do. So sometimes we know we're supposed to do something that's good, like clean our room or obey our parents, and we don't do those things. That's sin. And so is the bad things, like hitting or lying, or you all could probably think of plenty of examples. So God, though, doesn't want us to be attached to sin. He wants us to be separate from sin. There's a fancy church word that we use for that idea of being separate, and that's holy. So God wants us to be separate from sin. He wants us to be holy. In our story today, we are going to be looking at three men who chose to do the right thing. They chose to follow God, even when it was really, really difficult. And I think that's where we have a hard time sometimes, is when it gets hard, then we have a hard time following what God wants us to do. When it's easy to follow, there's no problem, but when it's hard, that's different. And so these three men chose to follow God even when it was very difficult. So our story today is found in Daniel 3, and you'll notice I am a little past halfway. Before we were way up here, close to the front. Now we're further back in the Bible, Daniel. And we're in chapter 3. Now, the book of Daniel, you've probably heard Daniel's name before. But today we're not looking at a story about Daniel. This is about friends of Daniel. And this is what it says. We're going to look at King Nebuchadnezzar. Ooh, that's quite a name, isn't it? Nebuchadnezzar. King Nebuchadnezzar had made a very large golden statue of himself. And he had put it right in the middle of where he lived, which was a place called Babylon. And he had told all the people around to come see the statue. And then he made a very important announcement. And this is what it says in chapter 5 and 6. This is what Nebuchadnezzar told the people. When you hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, drum, and every kind of music, by the way, those were all musical instruments. When you hear that music, you are to fall down and worship the gold statue that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. But whoever does not fall down and worship will immediately be thrown into a furnace of blazing fire. Now, you all are very smart, and you probably know what the problem is here. Are we supposed to bow down and worship a gold statue? No, absolutely not. We have one God, and that is the only God that we worship. And so Daniel's three friends, which their names were Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, also some weird names, but you've probably heard them before. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They said, oh, there's a problem here. We worship the one true God in heaven. We worship Him alone, and that we cannot bow down and worship a gold statue of a person. That's just not right for us. And so they refused. When the music would play, all the people would bow down and worship the statue except Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Now, there were some men who probably didn't like these three guys already, and so they went and told on Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They told the king that they were not bowing down and worshiping when the music was played. And so King Nebuchadnezzar said, well, we have a law about this. I made an announcement. This is what we have to do. If they are going to ignore my command, then they have a consequence that's going to happen. And so this is what I was saying. It was very hard. I'm sure it was very hard, knowing the consequence. I'm sure it was very difficult for them to say, we will not worship anyone except the one true God. But so this is what it says in Daniel 3 still, verse 16. It says, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to the king, Nebuchadnezzar, we don't need to give you an answer about this. An answer to this question. If the God we serve exists, then he can rescue us from the furnace of blazing fire, and he can rescue us from the power of you, the king. But even if he does not rescue us, we want you as king to know that we will not serve your gods or worship the gold statue you set up. So what are they saying? They're saying, first of all, we know our God is powerful enough that he can save us from this. We're not scared because we know God can save us. But they said, but if he chooses not to, we're still not going to worship your fake gods. And we're not going to worship this big statue that you set up. So they were being very brave to speak to the king and tell him what they really thought. And so Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, their answer made King Nebuchadnezzar so mad that he had them immediately bound up, and then he told them to heat up the furnace 7 times hotter than it already was. And then they threw Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego into the fire in the furnace. Now, suddenly, King Nebuchadnezzar noticed something. And he jumped up and he said, hey, didn't we throw 3 men into the fire? Because I see 4 men. And one of them looks like an angel. Now, this was probably very surprising to have seen 3 men go in, and then all of a sudden there are 4 inside. He was probably wondering what in the world is going on. Nobody would have just walked in there on their own, right? Nobody would have done that to themselves. So this is what it says in verse 26. It says, Nebuchadnezzar then approached the door of the furnace of blazing fire and called, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, you servants of the Most High God, come out. So he shouted for them to come out of the furnace. Now, in any other time, that furnace was so hot, there shouldn't be anything left inside. Everything should be gone. It would have been burned up probably instantly. And here's the king shouting for these 3 men who had just made him very angry, shouted for them to come out. And did you notice what he said? He said, servants of the Most High God. He realizes that their God has saved them. And so Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out of the furnace, and they were not hurt. And matter of fact, their clothes didn't even smell like smoke. That's how much they were protected. And so King Nebuchadnezzar praised God for keeping them safe. And this is what he said. He said, praise to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He said, there is no God who is able to do such great things. Now, isn't it wonderful that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego chose to follow God even though it was very difficult? They went through something very hard, and they were probably scared. They probably knew that they were going to die. And they went into that furnace not knowing what was going to happen to them. But God protected them. And they were able to walk out of the furnace completely safe. And not only that, the king began to worship the one true God. Now we find out King Nebuchadnezzar did not follow God all of the time. Sometimes he praises God and sometimes he doesn't. So the lesson might not have stuck for him. But still, for him to even do this once is a wonderful thing. He began to know the truth. Whether he accepted the truth is a whole different story. So God was with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the fire, and only God could rescue them. Does that sound familiar to you? See, we have all that sin in our lives, all those bad things we do, and the only person who can rescue us is God. And he did that through his son Jesus when he died on the cross. That was how God chose to rescue us from the problem of sin that we have. So now we can be more like this oil and water. Sin doesn't have to stick to us anymore. We can be separate from us because God will help us to do that. So that is something that I hope you guys are talking about with your parents and your families, because following Jesus is the most important thing we can choose to do. And it's not always the easiest thing, but it is always the best thing. So before we go, I do have a activity for you, and I have a feeling all of you are going to know what this is when I tell you the name of it. But since we're talking about the story of the fiery furnace, I thought it would be fun for you to play The Floor is Lava. But in this case, we're going to say the floor is a furnace. Okay? Just to help us remember the story as we're playing the game. So all you're going to do is you're going to, just as you go through your day, somebody will say, the floor is a furnace. And everybody has to try to get off the floor as quickly as they can. Whether you get up on the couch or you maybe go to a different room. I don't know. You all could probably play this game much better than I can. Now, I have one request though. Be careful. Don't climb on the furniture, okay? Because we don't want anybody to fall and get hurt. But, so play the floor is a furnace. And just have some fun with that, okay? And as you go, remember, God helps us to do what He's asked us to do. And He helps us to keep separate from sin, even when it's hard. All right, I hope you guys have a great day. If you were at church, you were able to get this. If you weren't at church, we have it down in the comments so your mom or dad can download it and print it out just like we normally have. There's all kinds of fun things in there to do that's about the fiery furnace. All right, I hope you guys have a fantastic week. I hope everything goes well at school. And remember, I'm praying for you. And I really hope that we'll get to see each other again soon. I'm sure Brother Dino will be calling later this week to tell us what's going to happen next Sunday. All right. I hope you all have a fun day, and I will see you soon. Love you. Bye.